Hey, shalom. Yabashim Shabakatah to all the brothers. Yahweh Shemal Atah Ba'Shem Yahweh shout out all the sisters. Priest and Captain Soccer War coming to y'all live from Memphis, Tennessee, man. Decided to do a recorded video for this topic that I wanted to discuss. Um, it's off the heels of an interview that I watched. Tucker Carlson, who some people may know, some may not know, is a right wing conservative reporter. He used to work on Fox News. He was platformed there first, became famous, working there for a number of years. This past year or so, he went independent and is now, doing interviews and producing documentary style content on his YouTube page. And over this last year, Tucker Carlson has taken a hardline approach at getting to the truth of many of what have been considered conspiracy theories for a number of years, in this country. Some of the topics that he's covered the last year has been the 9/11 quote unquote conspiracy. He was very prevalent in the whole Charlie Kirk assassination conspiracy talks. He's platformed a number of people that mainstream media doesn't want to, acknowledge or take a look at because of their controversial views. And I believe the interview that Tucker Carlson did this past weekend has opened the door for one of the Earth's greatest conspiracies of the last 500 or so years to begin to be spoken of and considered as a mainstream talking point. And so, if you don't know, this past week, Tucker Carlson did an interview in Israel with the U.S. ambassador to Israel, who was Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee is also a former Fox News commentator or reporter who also had a stint in the government. I'm not sure if he was a senator or if he was a congressman. I do know he may have ran for president in one of the primaries a couple years ago for the Republican side. And there's a rift that is occurring right now between conservative right-wing evangelical Christians and another sect of right-wing conservative Christians who call themselves Christian Zionists. And so Tucker Carlson, when interviewed Mike Huckabee to discuss the state of Israel and the recent conversations that have been going on concerning their expansion in Palestine, their treatment of the people of Gaza, and it's a long interview that Tucker Carlson had with Mike Huckabee. But I believe that there were two questions that were raised in the middle part of this interview concerning the legal right for Israel to lay the legal and moral right for Israel to claim, for the Jews to claim that land in the Middle East for themselves. And Tucker Carlson and Mike Huckabee go back and forth about the Jews' claim to that land. And then Tucker Carlson raises a second question, which is, if we are to say that this land is by God ordained to belong to these people, then who indeed are the people today that the Bible was speaking about? So I want to play some of the interview. So I'm gonna play it. I'm gonna pause it. I'm gonna talk back and forth, breaking down exactly what it is that's being discussed and how Tucker Carlson is setting this thing up. But I think it's necessary for those of us who subscribe to the truth, who understand the answers to the question that Tucker Carlson is answering. I mean, it's asking Mike Huckabee, and it's important for us to, understand the implications of the answers that Mike Huckabee is given in this interview, as it pertains to the truth, as it pertains to our struggle in this modern day Egypt against our oppressor, and the implications that an interview like this could have for what it is that we teach and we stand for. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring up the interview, and let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so boom, that's that. I need it to be. All right, that's what I want. All right, so this is Mike Huckabee, Tucker Carlson. If you go to Tucker Carlson's page, you can see the interview. It's about a 2 hour and 45-minute interview, but we're starting at the 1 hour, 3-minute and 57-second mark.
Than the current nation state.
So you may be a bigger Zionist than even the Jews are that live in Israel.
I'm trying to understand the implications of your theology for geopolitics, because you're saying that the present government of Israel has a moral right to take over what are now other people's countries.
No, I didn't say that, Tucker.
Then what are you saying?
I'm simply saying that the people who live in Israel, I think, have a right to have security, have safety. They have a right to be able to live in this land that they have a connection to for 38
I told myself when I said a prayer that I would not get annoyed, but as someone who is, the father of daughters, when I see child molesters hiding in Israel and escaping American justice, I think I have a right to safety in my country too. So you can understand that I think most people feel they have a right to safety. I do think Israel has a right to safety, and I hope that for them, and I'm sincere. But I'm an American, and I have a right to safety in my country too.
Of course you do.
So let me start with this first point right here. So Tucker Carlson is saying to Mike Huckabee, your theology has serious geopolitical implications, meaning if your belief in God says that these people have a right to other people's land, that's potentially a big problem with, the how the politics of various nations across the world, deal with one another, right? Then he goes on to say, Mike Huckabee goes on to say, I think that these people deserve the right to be able to be safe and be secured. And you can see that kind of pisses Tucker Carlson off a little bit, because he's like, now hold up. You're saying these people have a right to safety, but they're harboring criminals. They're harboring sex offenders. They're harboring people who have harmed children, who have escaped the justice here in the U.S. to go and seek asylum in Israel. And that's clearly something that he's not okay with. I think it's important to understand that on the two sides of these opposing right-wing conservative, Christians, is there's one set that looks at the state of Israel as though they are the people of God and they have a God-given right to that land. Then there's another sect that looks at those people and says, those are not a people of high morals. Those are not a people that, represent what it is that those people should represent if they are the people of God on earth. And so then their frustration is with these people having a right to exist, having a right to have a land, but not being a people that are morally up to par with what it is these conservative Christians feel people should be. And they have every right. Right now, in the midst of the Epstein files and all these things that's going on, there are a lot of people that have committed crimes that have not been brought to justice in America, but they are allowed to go to Israel and to escape justice and to live free, having committed crimes. And you can tell that the people who Tucker Carlson represents have an issue with that. Let me get back to it.
And I think so, but I just want to get to this point. If Israel were to say, God gave us in Genesis 15 all of Lebanon, all of Syria, all the way up to Iraq, would that be legitimate in your view?
I don't think in this particular day and time they're asking for it.
Would it be legitimate?
I'm not sure that it would be.
Why? Because you just said that God gave it to them.
Because I think that there is an understanding that the people of Israel today, now if they end up getting attacked by all these places and they win that war and they take that land, then okay, that's a whole nother discussion. But you and I started out. We started talking about something similar.
Now, that's the future for the Middle East. That's the plan that Israel has had all along. Tucker Carlson said, if your belief is that the land that was promised to those people in Genesis, the 15th chapter, belongs to these people, then that in the book of Genesis, the 15th chapter, the Most High made a promise to Abraham that one day his seed, his children, his descendants would inherit the promised land. The borders of that land, as laid out in the Bible, is from the Euphrates River, which is in modern day Iraq, all the way down to the Nile River, which is a land that encompasses many countries that exist today. Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, some of Saudi Arabia, some of Iraq, some of Egypt. And so Tucker Carlson is saying if your belief is that this land is ordained to these people by God, well, then what does that mean for these other countries? And Mike Huckabee is saying, well, they're not asking for that land right now. They're just occupying a small slither. But if they were to win that land in a war, if they were to defend themselves from an attack and took that land, then that's something different. All the aggression that we've seen from Israel in the Middle East over the last few years is to spark a response from those surrounding nations so that it can do what they did in Gaza. If you go back to October 7th with the Hezbollah attack on Israel and capturing some people and taking them hostage, that was the precursor for the genocide that's being committed in Gaza. Go look before October 7th at what the Israelis was doing to Hezbollah and doing to the people of Gaza that prompted that attack, and they're trying to take that same step with Iran. You understand? Right after this interview aired on Friday, February 21st. No, February 21st. It's Monday, February 23rd. And on the 22nd, Donald Trump came out and said that it's possible the U.S. may strike Iran either Monday or Tuesday. So right off the heels of this interview, Mike Huckabee says Israel doesn't want to take all that land. They just want the land that they're sitting on now. But let's say there was a war that broke out and they had to defend themselves and they took all that land, then that would be something different. That is the future of that land in the Middle East. That's the plan that the Zionists have, and that's what everybody should be expecting to take place, particularly if the U.S. attacks Iran. If the U.S. attacks Iran, Iran is going to retaliate against Israel, not against the U.S., and now there's war in the Middle East, and Israel can, expand its territory. Let me get back to the interview.
Christian Zionism.
But it turns out it's
and
not
now
simple because the core of Christian Zionism, you said, and I'm quoting you, is the understanding, the belief, the theological understanding that Jews have a moral and legal, we went through the legal,
biblical,
moral deriving from the biblical, from the promises in our Bible, which we share with the Jewish people, the first part of it, the Old Testament, that it derives from God's promise to the Jews. And so I have two questions. What are the borders of that? And who are those people in 2026? And you're not the first person I've asked, but you're the most reasonable, most gentle, most theologically informed person. So I'm really hoping for an answer.
Yeah.
The first question was the borders. I can't get an answer. Yeah. What those borders are. So I'm going to give up. But the second question is every bit as pressing, which is who are the people? Who are the modern? Yes. Who are the descendants? So we know, and I believe, and I agree with you as a Christian, that God promised this land from modern day Iraq to modern day Egypt to this people, the Jews, to Abram's, actually not to Abram's descendants, as it says in Genesis 15. Who are his descendants now, and how do we know who they are?
I think.
Now, that is the question. And the answer to that question is the greatest conspiracy cover-up of the last 500 years. And Tucker Carlson, using his platform, interviewing Mike Huckabee, who is a Christian Zionist who supports the existence of the state of Israel, for him to ask this question to Mike Huckabee now establishes it as a legitimate question that needs to be considered in the mainstream. And as Christians and Bible believers all over the earth begin to ponder this question, inevitably they are going to have to arrive at the answer which the Bible gives us, that the lost 12 tribes of the nation of Israel today are so-called Blacks, Latinos, and Native American Indians, who are the children or the descendants of the diaspora of North, Central, and South America and the transatlantic slave trade. And this is what the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge has been teaching since 1969. And we are the only authority of the Bible that can give you all of the history, that can give you all of the archaeology, that can give you all of the biblical prophetic proof that that is so. Now, for the rest of this interview, Mike Huckabee is going to try to answer this question that Tucker Carlson has just asked. And Tucker Carlson is going to walk Mike Huckabee down a path of creating a framework for identifying who the Jews are today. And by walking Mike Huckabee down the path of providing that framework, we're going to then watch Tucker Carlson show irrefutable proof that by the framework that Mike Huckabee establishes of identifying the Jews today and relating them back to Abraham, that it's impossible that the people who are in the land today are the descendants of the people who we read about in the Bible. And what this interview showed me is that there's a sect of Christian, conservative, Bible believers who maybe don't know the answer to the question, where are the descendants of Abraham today? Who are those children of Israel or those Jews in the earth today? But what they do accept and what they know they can prove is that the people in the Middle East today are not those people. And if Christians believe that the children of Israel, the Jews, have a God-given right to the land that was promised to them in Genesis the 15th chapter, then it is incumbent upon it is necessary for them to identify who those people are and then to be on the side of those people in God by making sure that they have that land. Let me go ahead and keep playing the interview.
I think they're the Jews, and we know who they are because they've always been a Jewish people. There has been an unbroken line of Jewish people, and they've lived in this land for 3,800 years. Sometimes not very many of them, because they were chased out all over the world. They were hunted down. They were almost annihilated during the Holocaust. They came back. To this day, Tucker, they represent, you know how many Jews there are in the whole world?
Now, Mike Huckabee just said, we know that those people, the descendants of Abraham from the Bible, are the Jews. Because for the last 3,800 years, there's been a unbroken line and a tract of these people living in this land, and it's been uninterrupted. Mike Huckabee just said, the people who are in Israel today have been in that land for the last 3,800 years, and they haven't been interrupted in their existence in that land. Let's see what Tucker Carlson comes back with as a reply to that.
Please, I understand. Look, first of all, the greatest genocide of Jews no one ever mentions was by the Romans, where they were literally banned from Jerusalem for 500 years.
Yeah, of course.
Now, we all know that at 70 AD, General Vespasian and Titus of the Roman army put an end to the Israelite state. They set up a siege of Jerusalem. They captured the city, and they committed a genocide of everyone who was present there. And there's an Ark of Titus that exists in Rome today, which celebrates the pillaging of Jerusalem and the destruction of the Israelite state. They call it the Jewish state. Now, we know that prior to that siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, many Israelites fled that land. And when they fled that land, they went south into Africa, because there they would be able to hide from the Romans. You go and read the Bible. Anytime the Israelites faced a threat from another nation that they could not overcome or that they were afraid of, their first option was to flee into Africa, was to flee into Egypt. Why? Because this was a dark race of people, and they could go and blend in amongst the other dark races of people that existed in Africa. This history it's been tracked in records, in archaeology, in books, in many different accounts. It can be proven. So Mike Huckabee just got cut, because how could you say there's a 3,800 year existence of these people in the land if Tucker Carlson just acknowledged that in 70 AD all of the Israelites was genocide was committed against them in that land, and that they were forced out of it and not able to return for 500 years. It's impossible that there's been a 3,800 year line of these people existing in this land if in 70 AD they had the land taken from them and couldn't return for 500 years. Let me keep going.
Of course. And it's all awful. And I'm opposed to all of that. I'm opposed to mass killing of anybody, period. I'm opposed to
hear
killing.
you say that.
I mean it.
Yeah.
And I hope
I
we can
believe
agree
that.
on that.
I believe that.
My question is, and it's not a bumper sticker answer, it's a sincere answer, how do we know? Because what you're saying is that certain people have a title to a highly contested region. They own it in some deep sense. So I think it's fair to ask, who are they and how do we know? So the current prime minister's ancestors weren't from here within recorded history. He has no deed. Bibi Netanyahu, on one side, his family's from Poland. They're from Eastern Europe. So how do we know that he has a connection to the people who God promised the land to, Abram's descendants? How do we know that?
Well, if you take the genealogy.
Now, Tucker just busted it wide open. Bibi Netanyahu's family, his ancestors, they're from Poland. They have no connection to the people of the land. We know that the people who were brought here in 1948, the people who were brought here after World War II, we know that those are not the ethnic descendants of the people that we read about in the book. So if you're saying that these people have a right to the land by God, then how do we go about proving who those people are so that we can make sure that if there's a God-given right for somebody to have this land, how do we know who those people are? Mike Huckabee has been put on the fence now because Tucker Carlson just clearly said Bibi Netanyahu, who was the president or the prime minister of Israel right now, if his ancestors aren't from this land, if his ancestors aren't connected to the promise that God made to Abraham, then why are these people being allowed to exist in the land? Mike Huckabee is about to respond, and he's going to establish a framework by which we can go about identifying who the children of Israel are today. Let's see what Mike Huckabee has to say.
That come not only from the Old, but the New Testament, you see that there is a historical connection through the entirety of the Old and the New Testament that details the Jewish connection to this land.
Does that include Bibi's family? How do we know that if his family
they were
comes here,
scattered?
But how do we know it's the same people? Why is that crazy? If you say to me,
if they speak the same language, if they worship the same God, if they follow the same Bible, if they follow the same cultures and traditions, and they always pray next year in Jerusalem, and they pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and they pray facing toward Jerusalem, does that not give you a little bit of a clue as to who they are?
Let's go through.
So Mike Huckabee just established a framework by which we can identify the children of Israel today. He said they speak the language, they follow the Bible, they keep the same customs and traditions, they pray for the peace of Israel, they pray facing towards Jerusalem, and this is how we can tell that that's who the children of God are. Those who the lost 12 tribes of Israel are. That's who the Jews are. That's the framework that Mike Huckabee has just established. Notice Mike Huckabee didn't say what we know by DNA. Mike Huckabee didn't say we know because of their blood type. Mike Huckabee didn't say we know because of the documented paperwork that shows that these people. Mike Huckabee just said the way that you can tell who the Jews are is if they're speaking a language, they're following the Bible, keeping the customs and traditions, they're praying for the peace of Israel, and they're praying facing Jerusalem. Now let's see how Tucker Carlson responds to Mike Huckabee's framework of establishing who the Jews are today.
Those things, because I would like to have a rational. This is the conversation I've wanted. Bless you. Thank you for doing this. Let's just go through those things.
Okay.
So one of the things I admire most about Israel is they resurrected a dead language in 1948. Good for them.
Well, they really didn't resurrect it. It was existent.
Okay, I'm not. That's a compliment. I'm not slighting.
No. But it is the first time in all of human history that a language has survived through this length of time. It's. I would call it. You might not, but I would call it a miracle. One of many.
Okay.
That you can attribute to this.
I think it's wonderful as someone who loves language. Netanyahu's parents did not speak Hebrew. Okay, they didn't.
So the first thing that Tucker Carlson addresses is the language, right? And of course, they're speaking of the language that's called Yiddish today. The Yiddish language that the Israelis speak is indeed a dead language, right? When the scholars throughout history that have been able to translate the ancient Hebrew and bring the records of the Bible into the English language, they knew how to read the language. They knew how to understand the consonants and the vowels and how the words were written and the definitions and the meanings of the words, but they didn't know how it sounded. And so they are giving credit to the Israelis for resurrecting a language that died after the Romans and the Greeks took over. And they accept that. In the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge, we resurrected the ancient Hebrew with the Lashon Kodash that we still teach and speak today. And people tell us that we're crazy. People tell us that it's pseudo-linguistics and that there's no evidence that the ancient Hebrew didn't have any vowel sounds other than the ah and the I. Now, when our oppressors do it, when white people do it, oh man, it's a miracle. It's amazing. When God does it, well, I can say when God does it, when black people do it, it's, oh, you niggas are crazy and it's pseudoscience and you don't know what you're talking about. Let's keep going. But no, let's not keep going. On top of that, the language that they quote unquote resurrected, Benjamin Netanyahu's parents didn't speak that language. They didn't understand that language being from Poland, that's the first X of the framework that Mike Huckabee established. They spoke the language. Tucker Carlson just said them people in Poland was not speaking the Hebrew language. Let's keep going.
Live in this region. Netanyahu, the founders of this country were mostly secular. Some of them were avowed atheists. They were not praying for the peace of Jerusalem. They weren't praying at all because they didn't believe in God. There's no genealogy linking their families to the people of this land 3,000 years ago. They're not. So how do we know, since they didn't share a language, they didn't share a religion, they had no religion whatsoever, how do we know that they had a right to come here from Eastern Europe and
but they were scattered.
Take the land?
They were scattered to Eastern Europe. They were scattered all over the world. There were many in Ethiopia. They were in Russia. They were in Poland. They were throughout Asia. Jews were all over the place, but they were still Jews. But they were still Jews.
Okay,
so now Mike Huckabee is saying, Mike Huckabee didn't refute anything Tucker Carlson just said. Tucker Carlson said they weren't speaking the language. Many of the people that were brought from Poland and Russia that settled, and Germany that settled that land in the Middle East that they call Israel today were devout atheists. They did not have a God. They didn't have a belief system. So they weren't following the Bible. They weren't keeping the customs and the traditions. You understand? They weren't praying for Israel. They weren't praying facing Jerusalem, which means that these people who were put in this land by the framework that Mike Huckabee established cannot be Jews, cannot be the lost 12 tribes of the nation of Israel, which now opens up the question, what people on the earth today do fit that criteria and that framework that Mike Huckabee established? Now, I can't speak for anyone outside of the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge, but since 1969, the priests and the prophets of the ISUPK have been raising up God's chosen people, the lost 12 tribes of the nation of Israel, and restoring to us our language, our knowledge and understanding of the Bible, reinstituting the traditions and the customs and the culture that God gave to us in that Bible. We pray to Jerusalem. You understand? We establish peace among God's people by returning them back to his law, statutes, and commandments. We keep the Passover. We keep the Feast of First Fruits. We keep, the memorial of the blowing of trumpets, the Day of Atonement. We keep the memorial of Hanukkah and Purim. as it's laid out to us in Second Maccabees and the Book of Esther. I don't know anyone else on the earth who's doing that. And there are many different religions that exist. There are many different organizations that proclaim to be servants of the God of the Bible and to proclaim to have identified who those children are. But I don't know anyone on the earth outside of the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge that can fulfill that can check all the boxes that Mike Huckabee provided in his framework for identifying the Jews in modern times. And so now, after this conversation, that question that Tucker Carlson asks is one that needs to be considered. And inevitably, as the discussion begins to take place, as the records begin to be examined, as they look on the earth for the people that check those boxes that Mike Huckabee established with his framework, it is inevitable that the truth that the ISUPK has been teaching since 1969 must be something that is discussed in the mainstream. It must inevitably, they're going to eventually arrive at our doorstep to gain the wisdom and the knowledge and the understanding that the Most High imparted on us since 1969 for the truth to now become something that is taught to the entire world. And if you watch this interview, Tucker Carlson does a masterclass of making Mike Huckabee say the things that he wants him to say so that he can prove to him that the people over there in that land today do not fit the criteria. Like Tucker Carlson did a magnificent job of making Mike Huckabee say the thing that he couldn't say. Because if any of this comes out of Tucker Carlson's mouth, it's anti-Semitism. But because it came out of Mike Huckabee's mouth first, Tucker Carlson providing the answers that he provides eliminates any potential blame or anyone obscuring the point that's being made, because all Tucker Carlson is doing is responding to the framework that Mike Huckabee established. And Mike Huckabee, for sure, he's pro-Zionism. He's pro the Israeli state, and he's going to speak in a way that acknowledges and accepts any behaviors that are exhibited by those people in that land because of his belief that they are God's chosen people. Tucker Carlson is dismantling that perspective by showing that those people that are over there today are not the people that we're reading about in the Bible. Let's get back to it.
Let me get to the nub of the question, since, again, a lot is at stake. A lot of money is at stake. Land is very valuable. Israel has a lot of resources. By the way, if you're accused of a crime, you can hide here. That's a pretty good passport to have. It's a good thing, right? So who's entitled to it? I don't understand, and you're very discouraged in the United States from asking this question for some reason. It's a totally rational
No, I'm not
question.
discouraged.
No, you're not discouraging.
Yeah.
Others do. You're like the only person I can have this conversation with. Everyone else will be like, shut up, Nazi. It's a foundational question. Are you speaking of an ethnic group or a religious group?
Well, now, again, he walked Mike Huckabee down, and now the question that must be the only way that you could say that the people in the land have any connection to the people in the book is if you say that connection is religious. And so Tucker Carlson wants it on the record. He wants it clearly established. He wants it to be something that this can be repeated and rehashed. And this is the hill on which we're going to battle out to see who's right and who's wrong. Is the Israeli claim to that land one that is religious, or is it one that's ethnic? Let's see the response.
I think you're looking at, for many people, it is religious. There are people who may not have a deep religious connection to Judaism, but they're still Jews.
Okay, so it's an ethnic category.
It is ethnic, but it is also religious. It is rooted in religion. You can't take it out of it. Now, that means
then how can an atheist?
Well, I will tell you this. There are some people who say, I'm Christian. They never go to church. They never pray. They never read their Bible. They don't tithe.
But they're not entitled to citizenship on the basis of that.
Well,
they're
but
not
I'm saying
entitled
that
to.
they still call themselves Christian, even though they identify in that way.
Here's the difference. You're saying that people who have this identification have a deed to a huge chunk of land on the Mediterranean. Okay, so there's, it's a right. You keep telling me it's a right, and so it's totally fair to say, if you come to my house and say, I've got the title to your house, I get to ask, may I see it? Where'd you get it? And that's exactly what happened here. People from Europe, Eastern Europe, came here, in a lot of cases atheists, and kicked out a lot of people who lived here.
Land.
Well, but
they did not just throw people out.
They bought a lot of land. There's no question about that.
They did buy a lot of land.
But they also, in 1948, kicked out a lot of people.
In the war.
Oh, it was a war. I agree.
Yeah.
I don't want to relitigate the history. I'm just saying it's a fact.
Okay.
Including a lot of Christians wound up fleeing, and they lost their homes, and they've never been allowed back. And all of this was justified on the basis of this identity that is the ticket to the right that you keep referring to. So my question is very simple. I'm going to wait patiently for an answer. Does this right derive from religious affiliation or from genetics?
And I would say it's both. But I would also say that when you said the Christians were kicked.
So there we have it. The question is, the way that we identify Jews today, is it religious or is it genetic? Mike Huckabee fumbled over it a little bit, but he said ethnic at first. And the only way, it has to be ethnic, because if you read the Bible, the children of Israel are a race of people. They are an ethnic group of people. The children of Israel were not established by a religion. The children of Israel were not established by, a belief system. The children of Israel were established via a bloodline connection to a man who, at a time on the earth when no one was obeying God, proved that he would obey God. And that is the basis of the promise that God made with Abraham in Genesis, the 15th chapter. And now it's on record that the connection that the people today have to Abraham is one that is ethnic, one that is genetic. And the people that live over there in that land today cannot say that their connection to Abraham is one via religion, because they do not keep the commandments and follow the laws that were given to the children of Israel in the Bible. You understand? Those people who live over there in Israel today, those people who call themselves Jews, they do not subscribe to the laws that are recorded in the first 5 books of the Bible. So they cannot say that they are Jews by religion, because they don't do anything that the Bible says to do. The Bible outlaws and forbids many things that are accepted by the people who live in that land of Israel today, namely the abuse of children, namely alternative lifestyles, namely the consumption of pork and shrimp and crabs and unlawful foods. There are all types of behaviors that are accepted and pushed in that land of Israel that are not in line with the laws that God gave his people. And so this interview is going to serve as the beginning of the question concerning the authenticity of those people in the Middle East to be questioned mainstream. And as debates and arguments and discussions begin to happen concerning those people and their ethnic ties to Abraham in the Bible, eventually the earth is going to get around to saying, well, if these people aren't them, then who is? And that is when the Lord is going to allow for the priests and prophets of the ISUPK and the Commanding General Yohana to come to the forefront and say, we have the answers. So brothers and sisters, this is what we've been fighting for. This is what we've been praying for. This is what we've been toiling and putting in work to allow for the Lord to give us a platform and to allow us to be able to have this word that we have been teaching to be accepted and to be heard. And that's what's on the horizon. This Tucker Carlson and open up a door that now cannot be closed. And it is a beautiful thing for those of us who know the Lord, who serve the Lord, and who have dedicated our lives to preparing for the opportunity to be able to fulfill the prophecies in the Bible concerning the earth, recognizing who the Israelites are. and understanding and not having an option but to accept the truth and the reality that has been hidden from many of the people on the earth. Now, there's just like with the Epstein files drop, there's all types of distractions. There's going to be some distractions as a result of this interview. Like I said, this happened 2 days ago. This interview dropped. They already trying to push the war in Iran. You understand? They already trying to do things that can keep this conversation from being had, that can keep the realization from everybody as to the true nature of the people that are in that land and the people that support the people in that land. They don't want that to come out. But this is of the Most High. You understand? This is the Lord's doing. And as we sit and watch what the Lord is doing, now is the time to prepare ourselves to be able to let the voice of the Lord be heard to everybody. So that's all I wanted to cover with the interview, man. Like I said, Tucker Carlson, the cat he's subtile. You understand? He's everything the Bible says that Esau would be. And as we see Esau's house being divided, we know that that is the beginning of the Lord paving the way for our house to be raised up as theirs is raised down to the ground. With that, Priest Captain Soccer War, Chief Soccer G, Angry Black Man Media. Please, if you like the video, like, subscribe, share. Tucker Carlson asked the questions, man. I say we begin to have the discussion. Who are the true Israelites, the lost 12 tribes of Israel, the Jews in the earth today, if they're not the people over there in the Middle East that came from Poland in the 1940s and was transplanted into that land? If those are not the children of God, if those are not the lost 12 tribes of the nation of Israel, who are they? Where are they? And how can we identify them?